For example 4, we are graphing the function here. We want to compare this to the general form y equals c plus a sine, so our amplitude times sine, of b times x minus d. And we want to see what we have here. The vertical shift comes from adding or subtracting something on the outside of our function, and we are subtracting a 3. So the new middle of our graph will be at y equals negative 3. The amplitude, we see that we're multiplying the front of the function by a negative 2. Remember that amplitude is considered to be the positive of that, but what is that negative going to do? Remember that the negative is going to flip our graph upside down. So our 5 points for sine will go in the upside down form of the sine function. Our phase shift, on the inside of the function we are adding a positive pi over 4. So remember that phase shift happens in the opposite direction of the sine, so we'll be shifting to the left, pi over 4 units. And the period comes from the b, what we've multiplied times the inside of the function, and we have not multiplied anything times the inside of our function, so the period will remain the same, just 2 pi. Now we would like to actually graph it. We need to find out where we start and where we end. So we're going to do the same thing we've been doing. We're going to take the input of our function, just the input. We're going to find out what the x values are by taking the input of the function and put it between 0 and 2 pi, and then solving for x. So we're going to subtract pi over 4 from all 3 portions. 0 minus pi over 4 is pi over 4, less than or equal to x. Those cancel. And then we need to subtract from 2 pi, which means we need to give it a common denominator of 4 before we do that. And then once we have our common factor of 4, 8 pi over 4 minus pi over 4 would be 7 pi over 4. So now we know where our graph will start and where the graph will end. Let's mark those off. Minus pi over 4, positive 7 pi over 4, and we're going to find our midpoint. We add together the endpoints and then divide by 2 or multiply by a half. So minus pi plus 7 pi would be 6 pi over 4, and then we're going to half that, and then reduce. And when I reduce that, we get 3 pi over 4. Add together minus pi over 4 and 3 pi over 4, you get 2 pi over 4, and then multiply that by a half to find the midpoint, and that's pi over 4, 2's cancel. 3 pi over 4 and 7 pi over 4 is 10 pi over 4, and then multiply that by a half. Get 5 pi over 4 when we reduce. So here are our midpoints, and now we are going to graph our sine function through this. Let's put in our y-axis. Now notice that our x values go from a negative value to a positive value, so we're going to put our y-axis in between those. And in fact, the y-axis is actually directly in between those, because we have the same numbers but different signs. And let's look back to where our vertical shift put us. So the vertical shift was negative 3. So that means the new middle of our graph will start at y equals negative 3. Our amplitude is 2, we'll keep that in mind. Okay, so here we go. We're going to mark off, say, negative 1, negative 2, negative 3. So here's the new middle of our graph. So the middle of the graph, instead of being at the x-axis, is now shifted down to y equals negative 3. And the amplitude is a 2, positive 2. So we're going to have to go down to -5 for our minimum. Okay, so let's plot. Now our first point is -pi/4. This is where we're starting. So we are flipping our sine function as well. So we're going to start here, -pi/4. And the sine function is flipped upside down, so at the second point we're going to be at our minimum, which is -5. Remember, the amplitude is 2, so we're going down from the middle 2 units. And then for the third point, we're back up to the middle. And then at my fourth point, we have to go up from there to a maximum of -1, keeping my amplitude being 2 units. And then at 7pi/4, we come back to the middle of our graph. So our sine function flipped upside down looks like this. So this is our sine function with a vertical shift of -3, an amplitude of 2, and a phase shift of to the left of -pi/4.